Week 7 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few running backs I have as sleeper options this week. The first guy, Caleb Huntley of the Atlanta Falcons. So right here, him and Algier, pretty much a 50-50 split over there in the backfield for the Atlanta Falcons. And Huntley, he looks like the more physical back. And he also looks like a back that could get some short yardage work for this Falcon team. So I know over the last few weeks here, since Patterson went down, his fantasy numbers haven't been great for Huntley. Week 4 versus Cleveland, 10 carries, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Week 5 at Tampa Bay, 8 carries, 34 yards. And Week 6 versus San Francisco, 16 carries, a pretty big workload, and 59 rushing yards. So this week here at Cincinnati, this is a ball game where I think the Falcons will be trailing early in this one, but I still think Huntley's going to get a role in this ball game once again. I know Algier's starting the games, but like I said, the touches are pretty much similar over the last 3 weeks since Patterson went down, and he's a big physical back. He tries for every yard, and he's a guy, if he could get a goal line stamper of 50, 60 yards, that's 11, 12 fantasy points for a guy available in 93% of fantasy leagues. The next running back is Latavius Murray of the Denver Broncos. So Latavius Murray, second half of the ball game last week, came in and he put up some decent runs in not a great fantasy day with 7.40, but he was running the football hard. Looks like the coaching staff over there in Denver, when Nathaniel Hackett likes him, and they signed him off the same practice squad. And going back to that ball game in Week 4 versus the Minnesota Vikings in London, he had a good ball game, Murray, filling in for Kamara. 11 carries, 57 yards, a touchdown, and a catch for 8 yards. And then in Week 6 at the Chargers, a big workload for a guy who didn't start the game. 15 carries, 66 rush yards, a catch for -2 yards. So this week here, I know it's a tough matchup versus the New York Jets that give up the 11th least amount of fantasy points to running backs on the season. But Latavius Murray, still a big physical runner, still a guy who's got some juice left in the tank for him, no doubt about it, after last season not getting a lot of carries with the Baltimore Ravens. So right here, I think he's good with this Denver Bronco team. I think at this point he looks better than Melvin Gordon, who looks a little sluggish and slow. And Mike Boone, he's still an unknown as well, where he could potentially break out. But Latavius Murray this week in deeper leagues, especially with the buys, I think is a decent number 2 running back or flex option. And I wouldn't be surprised in this one if he could get 60, 70 total yards and find the end zone. And the third and final running back I have as a sleeper this week, Sony Michel of the Los Angeles Chargers. So with a few veterans I'm going with on this list here. So now Joshua Kelly, he's going to be out a while with his knee injury here. And Sony Michel's coming in now, once again, is the backup for this Charger team. And he played a decent role in that Monday Night Football game versus the Denver Broncos with Michel. 8 carries, 28 rush yards, 3 catches, and 14 yards. Good for 7.20 fantasy points. So right here, if anything ever happened to Austin Ekeler, he could be a top 15 running back rest of the season here, Sony Michel. So as a handcuff to Ekeler, just in case, you should pick him up in fantasy leagues. And even the guy in deeper leagues, if you need a start, I think Michel could be decent this week here as a flex option or in deeper number 2 running back leagues here. So right now, Seattle gives up the 7th most fantasy points to running backs. And I think Michel, if he gets 8 to 12 touches in this game, it's possible he could get 8 to 10 fantasy points. And deeper leagues here, he's a running back I have as a sleeper, and he's available in 94% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few running backs I have as sleepers here for Week 7 of the fantasy football season.